Green Revolution, which is really the introduction of chemical agriculture under forced circumstances to countries like India, was 100% financed by the World Bank.
The kind of folks who were behind it at the beginning were the Ford Foundation and the Rockefeller Foundation in the 50s, who were concerned that if the issue of hunger in the Third World wasn't addressed, then poor people in those countries would be ripe for communist subversion.
In the 1960s, the World Bank was very happy to provide the Indian government loans for setting up chemical industries that would produce fertilizers and pesticides for the use within the country. And of course, the amount was not enough. So they also helped us with loans to be able to bring in, international companies such as Union Carbide.
So what they did was they took the advances in U.S. agronomy and crop breeding, which were basically breeding new varieties of crops that were more responsive to chemicals, chemical fertilizer and chemical pesticide and controlled irrigation water, and bring those to the Third World.
No farmer could take credit of any kind if he didn't buy the new seeds and the new chemicals. And internationally, India's foreign exchange borrowings went up 3 times just in 1 year of the Green Revolution.
Once the farmers were used to it, the subsidies were taken away because the World Bank and IMF were telling the Indian government that, you have too many loans, you have a big debt, and we need to get rid of that debt.
There were dramatic increases in yields as a result of the Green Revolution, mostly in the United States. In indigenous countries like Mexico, India, and elsewhere, farmers initially had success, but ultimately discovered with the over-reliance on pesticides and fertilizers that they were contaminating water aquifers, that they were having fertilizer runoff that was creating havoc with neighboring estuaries and fields, and that they ultimately couldn't afford to maintain the irrigation levels and the scale of production, which was dependent so much on a chemical infrastructure.
On one hand, you can say you have this fantastic pesticide or whatever that will take care of your rice. But in the case of India, which used to have 50,000 varieties of rice, every farmer or every farming community would plant at least 20-30 varieties of rice, some of which would have more resistance to drought, some of which would be more resistant to certain pests. So even if you had pest infection or even if you had a drought, you would still have a crop. But the fact that we have moved away into this single-mindedness monocultures, we have actually made ourselves more open to destruction and susceptible to droughts and pests and things like that.
Human suffering must be alleviated. God knows we have enough resources to feed everybody twice and then some. Then why is there poverty?
If we have hunger today in larger quantities, it is because the systems of agricultural production that pretend to grow more food actually rob more food, both from nature and other species, as well as from poorer people. If 800 million people are hungry today, every one of those 800 million people 10, 20, 30 years ago used to grow their food and feed themselves. World hunger is created by destroying people's capacity to feed themselves, which includes both a destruction of small farming systems as well as a destruction of people's entitlements. And that's in the rich countries and that's in the poor countries.